You've never quite believed that your presence actually matters to a room. You show up quietly. You leave quietly. Some part of you genuinely expects nobody notices either way. Not because you're pessimistic, because somewhere early on, you learned that your presence was optional. Nice to have maybe, but never actually necessary in any real sense. Never searched for, never truly missed. You could disappear from a gathering for 20 minutes and quietly assume nobody had even registered you were gone at all. You've built an entire way of moving through the world around this quiet assumption, taking up less space, speaking less often, preparing, always, for your own irrelevance. If that belief lives quietly inside you, this video is going to explain exactly where it came from. Not to make you sad about it, to finally explain it. And why underneath everything, it was never actually true. Your presence was never optional. Somewhere along the way, you were simply taught to believe otherwise. Picture this. You walk into a room full of people you know. Nobody turns immediately. Nobody says your name with real enthusiasm. And something in you quietly registers that. Not with anger, with confirmation. There it is again. Proof of something you already suspected. Your entrance simply doesn't move the room the way other people's entrances do. You watch someone else walk in later and notice how differently people react. Faces light up. Names get called out warmly. And you file that difference away quietly, silently. You've gotten used to entering rooms like this, softly, without announcement, almost apologetically, as if asking permission simply to occupy space that was never particularly reserved for you. You leave the same way you arrive, quietly, sometimes without saying goodbye at all, testing in some small, unconscious way, whether anyone actually notices your absence afterward. Usually nobody mentions it, and you tell yourself that confirms what you already believed. Though the truth is, most people simply assume you'll always turn up somewhere else, later. You rarely initiate plans, rarely reach out first, rarely ask people to specifically include you, because somewhere inside, you genuinely doubt your invitation would matter that much anyway. This isn't simply shyness or introversion, it's something more specific and considerably heavier, and understanding it starts with understanding exactly where this belief originally came from. Psychologists sometimes describe this as a rupture in what's called relational significance, the early, developing sense that your presence genuinely, meaningfully registers to the people around you. This usually forms in childhood through countless small, repeated moments, being noticed or not, being sought out or simply forgotten, being actively wanted or merely passively tolerated. Maybe your absence went unremarked far too often. Maybe you left rooms and nobody asked where you'd gone. Maybe your presence rarely, if ever, seemed to change anything meaningfully. Children build their sense of mattering from these accumulated signals. If enough of them suggest your presence is interchangeable, replaceable, or simply unnecessary, that belief quietly, permanently settles in. This creates what we might call optional presence identity, a core sense that you're welcome perhaps, but never actually required, tolerated, but never genuinely, urgently wanted anywhere specific. This belief doesn't announce itself directly. It hides inside smaller behaviors, not speaking up, not taking credit, assuming always that your seat could easily belong to someone else. Over time, this becomes deeply, quietly self-fulfilling. Because you expect to go unnoticed, you make yourself smaller, easier to overlook, gradually training the world to overlook you accordingly. And here's the exhausting part. The less space you take up, the more the original belief seems confirmed, even though you're the one who's actually shrinking the evidence. Here's what happens inside a child who develops this belief early. Presence, to a young child, isn't abstract. It's measured constantly through small, concrete daily signals. Was I greeted warmly or barely acknowledged? Was I sought out when quiet or simply left alone indefinitely? Was my absence noticed, or did the household simply continue unaffected? Maybe you grew up in a busy household where attention was scarce, distributed unevenly, or consumed almost entirely by louder needs, bigger crises. You learned to read the room accurately. There simply wasn't enough attention available for everyone, and you often ended up on the quieter, less prioritized side of that equation. This wasn't necessarily anyone's deliberate cruelty. Sometimes it's simply mathematics. Limited attention, distributed across multiple people, inevitably leaves someone feeling like the optional. But a child doesn't experience this as mathematics. A child experiences it as a verdict, My presence apparently isn't worth actively seeking out, remembering, or specifically making space for. And here's the open loop worth holding on to because we're absolutely coming back to it. People who feel optional often become extraordinarily attentive to other people's presence instead. As adults, this belief shapes nearly everything quietly. You undercommunicate needs, you avoid asking to be included, you brace almost automatically for being the one eventually forgotten. You may notice you're genuinely surprised every single time when someone specifically seeks you out, remembers small details about you, or actively makes effort toward your continued presence. That surprise itself is quiet, painful evidence. Somewhere inside, being actively wanted still feels like an exception to expect, rather than something you're simply, straightforwardly entitled to receive. You see it in the person who leaves social gatherings without saying goodbye, quietly testing whether anyone actually notices their departure. You see it in the friend who never initiates plans first, always waiting to be invited, genuinely uncertain whether their inclusion would matter enough for someone to remember specifically. You see it in the coworker who assumes their absence from a meeting would go entirely unnoticed, quietly surprised whenever someone actually asks where they've been or mentions missing them. You see it in the partner who apologizes reflexively for simply needing something as though their needs are an imposition rather than a completely normal, expected part of genuine relationship. You see it in the person who feels a flash of genuine disbelief whenever someone remembers a small detail they mentioned once, in passing, weeks earlier, unprompted and unrepeated. You see it in the one who quietly assumes they could be replaced easily in any friend group, any team, any family gathering, without meaningfully disrupting anything for anyone else. You see it in the person who stays unnecessarily quiet in group settings, genuinely believing their specific input wouldn't add anything that someone else couldn't equally, adequately provide instead. You see it in the one who feels intense discomfort being celebrated, centered, or specifically prioritized, because being the actual focus feels unfamiliar, undeserved, and you see it in the specific quiet ache of loving people deeply while still, somewhere inside, doubting whether your own absence would ever genuinely register as a real loss. This creates a particular kind of loneliness, being surrounded by people who would, in reality, deeply miss you, while never quite believing that truth applies specifically to yourself. I promised we'd return to something important. People who feel optional often become extraordinarily attentive to other people's presence instead. Let's talk about exactly why that's true. When you grow up uncertain whether your own presence registers, you develop a heightened, almost compensatory sensitivity to whether other people's presence is properly noticed and acknowledged. You become the one who remembers birthdays, small preferences, offhand comments others forget entirely, because you understand intimately exactly how it feels when those details go unnoticed. You give other people the specific attentive noticing you never quite received yourself, not performatively, genuinely, because you know precisely how much that noticing actually matters to someone. The tragedy isn't that you're deeply attentive to others. The tragedy is that this same generous attentiveness rarely, if ever, gets directed back inward, toward your own presence. Here's the reframe that matters. Your presence was never actually optional. It simply existed inside an environment that didn't have the capacity to properly register it consistently. That's a statement about the environment's limited bandwidth, not about your actual worth or significance. Limited attention doesn't mean limited value. Those are two entirely separate, unrelated things. The people who overlooked you weren't accurately assessing your importance. They were simply distracted, overwhelmed, or genuinely limited in what they had emotional capacity to notice consistently. So, what does healing this actually look like? It begins with practicing initiating contact first sometimes, instead of always waiting passively to be sought out by someone else. It means noticing and gently challenging the automatic assumption that your absence wouldn't matter, even in small, low-stakes moments. It means allowing yourself to take up appropriate space in conversations without immediately assuming someone else's input would matter more, or that yours is somehow simply extra, unnecessary. It means letting yourself actually register it fully when someone does seek you out, remember you specifically, or genuinely notice when you weren't there for something important. This belief kept you quiet and adaptable during an environment with limited attention available. It was reasonable once, given the circumstances. But you're finally allowed to take up more room now, because your presence was never optional. It simply existed somewhere that never had enough room to fully notice it. And you're allowed right now to finally fully take up space.